right, let's read this. Now Jericho, this is Joshua 6 verse 1. Now Jericho was securely shut up. Most of you you might know this story, but what's happening here is Joshua, this man of God, is leading God's people into their promised land. Again, it's their promise, it's their inheritance, it's contending for something, but there's something in the way. There's a whole kingdom in the way that they have to go through. Okay, so Joshua 6 verse 1. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. So Jericho is the town that they're here to take over. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horns, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him. So this is God speaking to Joshua about what's going to happen, how it's going to all unfold. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant and let 7 priests bear trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. So it was when Joshua had spoken to the people that the 7 priests, I'm just going to read the 7s, bearing the 7 trumpets of horns, ram's horns before the Lord, advanced and blew the trumpets. And the ark of the covenant and the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. So this is like this massive commotion going on. They're marching around the walls of Jericho, and they're just marching. Nothing else is happening. They've got no battle plan. They're not planning to try and jump into the city and take it by force. They're marching around in obedience. And now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, this is interesting. We'll take a look at this in a sec. You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout. Then you shall shout. Verse 11, so he had the ark of the Lord circle the city around it once. Then they came to the camp and lodged in the camp, and Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets before the ark of the Lord continually blew the trumpets, and the armed men went before them, but the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord. And it continues, and he says, and they did this for 6 days. They marched around the city for 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day, this is verse 15, that they rose early about the dawning of the day and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. And on that day only, they marched around the city 7 times. The 7th time it happened, the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. Verse 20, so people shouted when the priest blew the trumpet, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Okay. Big chunk of scripture there. What's the story about? You may not always understand what God's leading you into, instructions He's giving you. Sometimes it seems quite counterintuitive, illogical, unreasonable. I mean, seriously. But we are called to obey. God's called us to obey. That's what it looks like to contend. It looks like obedience. These battle instructions that were given to Joshua, they're super complex, they're specific, they're strange. How many, I remember... where were we driving back from? We were driving back from somewhere one time late at night, and we were driving, and you know how you hit like a detour sign, and you're like, uh-oh, the night's going to get a little longer. It was past midnight, and so we're driving around, and we're following these detour signs, and it's like completely turned us around after like 5 minutes. And we're thinking, surely, hopefully this doesn't lead us to just some random place, and we've got to figure out our way home, because the maps was only showing us one way home. We had to follow these detour signs, and so we kept following it. It added like a 30-minute delay, but we got home. Those detour signs can be so annoying. But I have like this other thing that me and Vanessa get into this constant fight over should we use Google Maps to get to places we already know how to get to? Now, I don't know if you're a Google Maps user or you trust your bearings or Waze or Apple Maps or anything like that. But my thing is I think maybe I am slightly scarred growing up knowing that Dad took an extra 30 minutes to get anywhere because he trusted his own navigational experience versus Google Maps. Because Google Maps is like live traffic reporting. So it'll update you with oh, there's a new way to check out. You can save 5 minutes. Yeah, I want to always save the 5 minutes if I can. Anyway, so anytime, we could be driving 5 minutes down the road to Vanessa's parents' place, I put on Google Maps every time. And Vanessa's how much time are we really going to save? But that's the thing, right? Don't interrupt God's plan with your wisdom. Don't derail his promises with your own proposition. Sometimes we're pretty sure we know which way to go and how we're going to get there and a better way. And God's way seems so difficult and strange and convoluted, but his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He's got live traffic reporting. He knows what's going on at all times across the whole sphere of the world. He knows everyone's stories and he knows how it all fits together perfectly. And so in his perfect time and in his perfect plan, when we obey, we reach that harvest. And I thought it was really interesting how Joshua commanded the people saying, don't shout, don't make any noise with your voice, don't let a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say shout. You know what it reminded me of? It reminds me of when the angel silenced John the Baptist's dad, Zechariah, for speaking doubt and unbelief. So Zechariah was an old man, and there was a word given to him saying that you're going to have a son. And he's like, are you kidding me? I'm so old. And then the angel muted him. He was mute. And he couldn't say anything. And you know, it was interesting to consider that John's dad, Zechariah, was silenced because he doubted until John was born, where Zechariah, another Zechariah, generations prior, was the prophet who spoke saying that God would make a way not by might nor by power, but by his spirit. Same two names. And it's a question to us. It's what type of prophetic person am I going to be? Am I going to be the person that's questioning everything God's inviting me to do? When he speaks clearly, am I questioning it all the time? Or am I God, lead me. I have no idea how to get this done anyway. This thing's crazy. This journey is insane. I'm going to follow you. And God's calling us to contend in that way. Isaiah 55 says, my ways are not your ways, neither my thoughts your thoughts. As the heavens are higher than the earth, as the greatest satellite he has, traffic satellite, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So we may not see, but we're called to believe. We may be discouraged, but we're called to lean in. We may not understand, but we're called to obey. God's calling us to believe, to lean in, to obey.